Hello everyone, welcome to the Gaia Education webinar. Today's webinar is called COVID-19 and Opportunities for Shifts in Consciousness. And we're going to have some of our worldview facilitators here to talk about these things. And before I go on to my colleague who will introduce them, I'd just like us all to pause for a moment and just be with ourselves and ground. So thank you everyone and welcome. This broadcast is live on Facebook and also on YouTube, and you'll have the opportunity to post comments and questions in the question box. So I'd like to now pass over to Sylvia, who is our coordinator of education. Hello, Sylvia. Would you like to introduce the speakers?
Thank you, Jane, and welcome everybody. My name is Sylvia. I'm one of the speakers today and the coordinator of the online programs for Gaia Education. And today we're going to speak about the worldview dimension. The worldview dimension is one of the 4 dimensions of the wheel of sustainability as we know it. And it has 5 components or 5 modules that are explored during this module. Those are the holistic view, worldview, the reconnection to nature, transformation of consciousness, which is the key part or the core part of this webinar today, health and healing, and social engaged spirituality. And it's a pleasure for me to introduce our facilitators, and they will be speaking about their relationship with the worldview and their experience. And they are here, Gracelynn, Della, and Sascha. So anybody can start. Della, do you want to start?
Yeah, thank you. Good to be with you all, and really welcome to all those folks listening. We are just really excited to talk about this opportunity for worldview shifts in this time that we're in. So yeah, thank you for listening in, and we really do welcome questions and comments throughout the program. So just hello from me, and happy to have this conversation.
Thank you, Della. And Gracelynn, do you want to say hi? We will have the opportunity for each one of you also to introduce yourself a little bit longer and share with everybody how is your connection with the worldview, and how is your experience connected to this particular dimension. Gracelynn?
Thank you for having me here. I'm so glad to be with all of you. I always start my introductions with my name. My name is Gracelynn Lau, and in the Cantonese speaking world, my name is Lau Zhongyan, but they both means honor to the creator and be grateful. So my name really called me to honor all this connection that I have with my 2 sides of the world. And do you want us to go into talking about connections with worldview, or just saying hi right now?
We can start saying hi,
Okay.
and then go back to Della and start a little bit deeper. Sascha?
Okay, and I want to honor that right now I'm speaking from the territory of Hong Kong, previously colonized land, and which was my birth home. But during the course, when we started the worldview course, I'll be back in Canada. I'll be facilitating on the traditional territory of the Canton people. So that gives you a little bit of how I come into my journey in questioning who I am in all my relation. Thank you.
Thank you, Gracelynn. Sascha, do you want to go?
Welcome, everyone. I'm to be here to share this time and space with you. I hope you can hear me well, because my connection is interrupted what I receive. So hopefully sending is better than at the moment. Yeah, I'm to this new worldview dimension, and
Right, so we lost Sascha. He was having issues with connections. Okay, so while Sascha is coming back, I don't know if you want to go a little bit deeper. And thank you, Gracelynn, for reminding us and introducing us to acknowledging the land that we are in. So well, I want to acknowledge that I am calling from the territories of Salish peoples, what we call British Columbia, Canada. And I will pass for introductions to Della.
Thank you. So yeah, again, my name is Della. I'm calling from the San Francisco Bay Area, Ohlone territory. And I actually identify as a renegade economist, which might feel strange being, being a facilitator of the worldview module. However, I really see that my leverage point for systems change that I love to work in is the realm of the worldview. So I really relish exploring paradigms and worldviews and values, and how do we change them to create more equitable and sustainable economic systems. So yeah, I would say that I really identify as a renegade economist. And by way of introduction, the ways that manifests, besides facilitating on the Gaia Education module for the worldview, I also am a co-founder of the California Donut Economics Coalition. So focusing about donut economics, I am working on that project. I also am a right livelihood coach. So this would be working with individuals using Buddhist economics and Dharma. I'm an alternative economics consultant, working with some alternative models, and just general teacher, researcher, work with the Capra course, just all sorts of different things, but they all really do focus on this worldview shift to shift economic systems. So with that, I'm going to pass over to you, Gracelynn. I'd love to hear more about you. I'm sure everyone will.
Thank you, Della. And I think almost it's more like a personal story for me. I somehow feel like it's not me choosing worldview, or I see that it's so important for our time, but it's just like some kind of questions about my faith that I could not shake off at my younger age. So I was born and raised, like I said, I was born and raised in a British colony as a Chinese person who's kind of cut off from her Chinese heritage. I was also raised in a Christian family. So in my childhood, there's not much about what is my cultural heritage or how to embrace my ancestry, things like that. And then it was in 2007, I came across ecofeminist theology, and that totally changed my world. It's telling me that in my faith, there's different ways to be in relationship with myself and with the more than human being world and with the rest of creation in that paradigm, but which is the universe, and from a more feminist place. And so that totally turned my life downside up or upside down. And then I realized, as someone was born and raised in an urban city filled with 6 million people, I had animal phobia since I was a kid, and I was exactly what people describe as the nature deficit disorder person. I don't know how to be in nature, so my brain tells me, or my worldview tells me, that I need to learn a different way to be in relationship. But my entire body and my practice and my education has nothing to do with that worldview. So it took me basically 10 years to unlearn everything and relearn my way into walking my talk, and which brought me to permaculture and mindfulness practices and horticultural therapy, and eventually being part of the ecovillage movement, which is where also I met Jane and Sylvia and some of the Gaia Education folk at our ecovillage in Shawnigan Lake. So that was about me, and I have to say, like, worldview, it's never stopped for shaping who I show up as a person in the world. Like even right now, at this time, I'm doing my PhD study at Queen University in Kingston. And it's really asking me to dig deeper into how do I see Indigenous and sexual dynamic and relationship in the North American context as someone who it's not Indigenous, but also had a colonial past in other part of the world. So it's constantly problematizing identity and seeing relationship and perspective from many different ways.
Thank you. Thank you, Gracelynn. I can see we've lost Sascha for the moment, so maybe I can pass on about the economic aspect and worldview. Della, maybe you could say something about that. And also how it relates to the ongoing pandemic.
Yeah, and I just want to uplift something Gracelynn said about unlearning. I think that is just crucial because I really hear you, Gracelynn, on that when we grow up either through our cultures or families, systems, or even our educational systems, we learn certain things, and then it's necessary to unlearn them and to be unattached to worldviews so that we can then see the other worldviews and pick and choose what's more helpful for a more sustainable civilization. And I would say for me, that really relates to economics, that I love to just question what are the assumptions underlying traditional or mainstream economic thinking, and what are the worldviews that underpin them. And then if we can interrogate those, question those, then we can kind of change them to be something that will bring more flourishing for humans and the planet. So just to give an example, when economics was first created as a discipline, it was in the realm of moral philosophy. Adam Smith was a moral philosopher. And I like to think about that because economics since then has really become more and more mathematized and more like a hard science. And that's not to say that hard science and math are not incredibly beautiful disciplines. It's just that economics really is about these questions of power and our relationship with ourselves and our work, and our relationships with one another, whether we see collaborators or competition, and our relationship with the more than human world. So again, that question of worldviews comes up in economics. But thank you for asking that. Yeah.
And Sascha, we've got you back online. Would you like to say something more about yourself and your connection to worldview and how it relates to the pandemic? Okay, we're not hearing Sascha.
Yeah, I think the connection is really not good. There may be a delay. So I wonder we can continue the conversation with Gracelynn and Della. Okay. Sascha has been, a facilitator for the worldview for many years as well, and I would like to hear from him whenever he can connect back again. I really would like to explore that unlearning because as a facilitator myself of the worldview, but in Spanish, that's where we start actually. We start exploring this unlearning and how the shift in consciousness actually is completely related to the way that we let go and we become aware and realize the many patterns and the many ways that we carry with us from the worldview. And what is the worldview? Because some people may say, well, I don't know. Well, worldview is that water around us. If we are fish, we don't even notice that is there. We don't notice until we start being intentional. So I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that, the unlearning and the true intentionality of, starting to see the patterns and starting to change those patterns. Any one of you?
I just really want to speak to the COVID opportunity right here. And because when Sylvia asked what are the nudge or what pushes us into questioning ourselves, it's actually, it takes crisis. And in Cantonese, crisis, it's ngai gay. Ngai, it's danger, and gay, it's opportunity. So I think the Chinese language is showing a different meanings of crisis. It's there when there's danger, there's also the other side, it's opportunity. And speaking from, I'm an expressive art therapist as well, and I've been doing like more socially engaged healing work, collective trauma work, currently in Hong Kong. But related to COVID, I really see that it's challenging how we see individual wellness and health, and it's not only for people like we're all wearing masks or struggling whether wearing masks is good or not. But I think this is also posing a questions for all these wellness practitioners, because we're always, when we think of wellness, is the society or even the economy is telling us we need to practice self-love, it's all individual. But when COVID comes here, we're pushed to realize that we're deeply embedded into a wider, larger webs of relationship, that it's not just my wellness or my family wellness, but it's the wellness of all. And even this continent wellness will affect the other one. So I think it's, for me as a therapist at this moment, I think it's really asking me, what are my responsibility? How do I consider more than just individual sessions or healing into looking at building more community capacity in processing our collective experience at this time? So these are some of the questions that I'm juggling with myself. Oh,
There's music or a rings from somebody.
So we have Sascha back.
I'm so sorry. This is kind of very bad technical. We'll follow what has been said until now. I'm very sorry.
Sascha, I wonder if you shut down the camera and we can only hear you. And there is somebody with a noise that I don't know where it's coming from.
Hello?
Hello? Sascha, maybe you could say something about yourself and in relation to worldview and what you feel is important about it. I don't know that we're getting Sascha.
No, there is a delay. I think we can carry.
Yeah, I'll continue on. And
thank you, Della.
I might recommend that, Sascha is such a brilliant thinker on this. Maybe if Sascha writes in the chat, one of us can uplift his voice in that way. So I just want to pick up on what Gracelynn started around this opportunity. And I love that you brought in that danger and opportunity in that word crisis. So one thing that I noticed is that COVID-19 has really laid bare and exacerbated some of the existing harms or sufferings within the system. And like one frame that I've heard is that inequality, or that COVID-19 has been an inequality ratchet, that it's ratcheted up inequality. And I think we see that with rising wealth in terms of Jeff Bezos, but also all the folks who have been impacted in terms of their homes, their health, and their work. So I think about the opportunity to see more clearly that the systems that we have, the kind of the growth addiction, the profit motive, model, our current health systems, all of that, even in terms of women's work and education, how many women have dropped out of the labor force, and how many parents have had a hard time, taking care of children while continuing to work. And just all of this, it's really, I think one opportunity is that it's laid bare the inequalities, inequities in the system. And that gives us an opportunity to question them, to think big, to interrogate, and to change systems from a worldview perspective. So what is it about what we want to shift about how we see our work? What is essential, for example, or our travel? I don't know if other folks have, I've experienced this, that travel feels much more special and sacred now, that I'm not going to try, you know, it's like how many meetings I don't need to fly for, right? So hopefully this is an opportunity to see more clearly and then to address those underlying issues that we're really noticing.
Gracelynn, would you like to add to that about worldview in relation to COVID? I know you said about opportunity and crisis. Can you elaborate a bit more on that with regards to your personal experience?
I really think this is asking us to rethink what is wellness and reconsider how to take care of more than just self, but how do we look into community wellness? How do we look beyond? How do we, and that looking beyond who we are is like coming back to the work that reconnects work that your enemies speak about. Like, how do we remember who we actually are in a wider webs of life? Like, are we just me and also a planetary being? And from that place, how can we generate more resilience and community capacity to process what we have been experiencing right now? From my personal experience, because I have returned to university in the last 2 years as a grad student, and I really see the resilience level in general in the city, especially in grad school, are very challenging and very tough for the younger generation. And when I think about my own experience, I was able to respond and create, and that was the capacity wasn't taught in school, but those were my skill building in my time living at an eco-village. And then it really dawned on me to wonder, how can living in an eco-village or living holistically, sustainably, has anything to do for building resilience for someone doing grad school at this moment and being able to respond to crisis? And I realized it was that relational capacity that I had built up during my time at the eco-village, where I'm not only taking care of my timeline, I'm not compartmentalizing my life. And like, this is where I work. I work in one place, and then I go to hang out with friends in the pub, or like, my life is not compartmentalized. We take care of everything: people, myself, my emotion, my spiritual practice, the animal, the land, all at once. And that rich experience was really, I didn't know I was learning that when I was living at the eco-village. But now, 5 years later, during COVID, in the city, in the university, I realized, wow, those are resilience skills that is transferable into a crisis. And it really helped me to think, in the mainstream culture, we're really taught to do our lives by ourselves. We somehow have neighbors, but we actually don't talk to them so much, or we're so not used to showing our weaknesses and collapse or be vulnerable with them. And those are skills, actually, when we learn to live intentionally with other human beings and explore our values and worldviews and learn to live together in differences intentionally. So that was such a learning moment for me. It seems like I was working with Daniel Grimber last summer, and Daniel is also one of the Gi, and we were at the Eco-Village contest, and we were exploring what are the meanings of crown, like coronavirus. It's crowning, and I have to honor Daniel in his teaching and sharing. And he said, the crowning is actually a birthing experience for a lot of the mothers. And the crowning is when the baby's head is about to push through. But that was the place when the midwife would just relax and ask the mom to not push, but to breathe. And it's difficult, it's painful, it has a burning feeling. But this is the time to let the baby to find its way out on its own time. So I remember Danny was asking us, are we the midwife receiving a new world? Are we the mother who is giving birth to a new world? Or are we the baby? Or maybe we're all three. Maybe we're midwife, giving birth to a new world, and we are the new world that we're creating. And that metaphor of COVID, of coronavirus, stays with me since last summer. And
Thank you, Gracelynn. The midwife analogy is really interesting, midwife baby, and yeah, thank you. And maybe Della, you could say something if you have a response to this, but also there was a question came up. Someone is asking about, did you see it? In these times of inequality, what next step can we take with regards to worldview? So maybe you could say something around that.
Yes, thank you, Kim, for your question around how can we shift worldview, knowing this what's being laid bare about inequalities. I would say two things come to mind. One of them is in this idea of having opportunity. There are two frames of what can happen in a crisis or a disaster. One of them is called disaster capitalism. And this, Naomi Klein coined this term, and it's kind of ways that when there's a disaster, ecological or a pandemic, sometimes states and corporations can come in and kind of utilize the crisis for private gain and widening inequality. And really, we can see this really in Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico, just the privatization of the whole country and the power grid and just taking away resources. That's one example. The other side of that, though, is something called disaster collectivism. So this is how, in a lot of times in crisis, again, ecological or pandemic, we see folks mobilize to support one another. We see mutual aid and solidarity networks. And I've seen that too in the pandemic, people making masks for one another, people helping, get groceries to folks who can't leave their homes, or even expressions of solidarity across countries. Really, we're seeing that right now in many ways. So just to say that one way to take this moment is to turn towards disaster collectivism. So in wherever your spheres of influence are, even if it's your own neighborhood, to create more mutual aid or solidarity networks, like folks doing phone trees with their neighbors, if somebody's unwell or needs support or needs groceries, or, also folks who are suddenly loss of income or whatever that is, right? So we can turn towards that way, and then in our cities and our countries, and then in globally, just what does it mean if we all turn towards disaster collectivism, that we see this as a way to turn towards one another for support, instead of turning away and kind of going into doomsday retreats and strongholds and kind of, exacerbating those inequalities. So I've seen a lot of instances of this, and I would say I encourage folks to continue in that direction. And then the other thing I would say, a way to shift worldview that I love to do, I love to use traditional mechanisms of marketing and social media for paradigm shift. Like I love to, there's so many, let's say Instagram folks who are selling things, and I love to go on and read something from Joanna Macy, or some poem or something, like this idea of marketing, or this economy of attention and all this. People are already online. So what if we invite some beautiful poems, and other people are already doing this, but I love to play with that. And to, what if, those things that go viral are those things that are inspiring, uplifting, and connective. So that's just another fun thing that I like to explore of how to change the worldview in this moment.
Yeah, thanks for that. It's very inspiring to hear about harnessing the power of worldview towards paradigm shift. I'm really, that's really exciting for me. Gracelynn, Sylvia, would you like to add anything else about this, particularly about the work that reconnects? I know you guys are very involved with that. And with regards to worldview, how is that connecting people in these current times?
Yes, thank you. So yeah, the work that reconnects, for those who know the practices and have experienced one of the workshops, one of the events of the work that reconnects, is one of many tools that we have to reconnect to ourselves, to each other, and to nature. And one thing that I would like to add to what Gracelynn and Della had to say is there's always this question of do I start with myself? Do I start with the community? Where do I put my resources, my time, my energy? And there is always this struggle, about if you haven't done the work with yourself, you cannot do the work with others. And when do we decide that we have done the work and are ready for working with the others? So in many ways, practices like the work that reconnects actually help us to understand that there is no perfection, that we live in uncertainty, and that we cannot wait until being perfect, because we don't even know what that perfect is defined, in order to start involving ourselves, in working with communities and with changes that had to happen. Like Della said, you can start with very small steps around you, and that actually informs your own change inside of you. So in the worldview, one of the things that you're going to see is this toolkit of different practices that actually, instead of being seen as just one individual practice to make myself more enlightened, or more aware, that's one of the way of seeing them. But actually, those are tools for grounding me and to help me to reconnect more with my work in the world and in the community. So both, I want to say that, both Gracelynn and Della are experienced World that Reconnects facilitators as well, and part of the World that Reconnects network, which is great to have that combination, like the powerful combination of economics and World that Reconnects that Della has, or the powerful combination of, ecofeminism and therapy, arts therapy, with the World that Reconnects that Gracelynn has. So I will leave them to explore that topic a little bit further.
I really want to add to that. I really think the socially engaged spiritual practice is really speaking to our time right now, and especially in the last 2 years, not only COVID, but with the injustice and all this kind of like different kind of social movement, we observe there's burned out, and we see that system change. The more, as a therapist, the more I work socially engaged with people, with folks, with community, I see that systematic change has to go hands in hands with personal healing. And in the other, in a non-holistic practice, which is like in the compartmentalized ways of doing life, healing is always just like, oh, I have my own trauma, my family trauma, my relationship trauma. It doesn't have so much of a socially engaged perspective. A lot of therapists starts to realize we need to bring that to a wider political or socially engaged capacity. But a lot of the spiritual practice is like always maybe not so grounded in action. But right now, when we look at the news, it's actually a spiritual practice. It's very triggering to watch the news. So how do we engage in system change, but at the same time take care of our own emotional capacity and ground our spiritual practice in that witnessing of what's happening in the world? I think is very relevant in our times. And there's like World that Reconnects, one of the very helpful tools, but I actually think this is a great opportunity for a lot of the health and wellness practitioner to work in collaboration with social activists or environmental activists to bring resources together in response to the time we're living in.
Yeah, this links to a question that's just come up. I think you can see, how do we engage systemic change whilst taking care of our spiritual well-being? I've also been involved in the work that Reconnects network for many, many years, and also the Engaged Spirituality movement. I think some of you know International Network of Engaged Buddhists that operate out of Bangkok. And I remember when I first met Joanna Macy in 1994, that was a deep ecology summer school many, many years ago. And they were telling us that it came out of the environmental movement, because, you know, all the teachers on that at that time, Joanna Macy and her peers, they had all been working with despair and empowerment work, and they'd all got burnout. And so this kind of deep ecology that came to the work that Reconnects practices came out of the spiritual dimension of the environmental movement. And I think when we look at the crisis we're in now, and I do worry about the young Extinction Rebellion people and people like that who are amazing and activists, but, you know, how do we sort of harness this inner work around that? So I just really like to hear your views on that, because I think it's really, really important.
Yeah, just to make it into a practice, what Gracelynn was sharing, one thing that I love to practice from the work that reconnects is the breathing through meditation. And I often use this while listening to the news. So this comes from originally, Buddhist inspired, but work that reconnects. But you listen to, let's say, the news, and you imagine that you're breathing in the suffering that you're hearing. Whether it's what's happening around the world in terms of wars and conflict, or whether it's ecological devastation or climate change, you imagine that you're breathing in that kind of that dark smoke of suffering, and then you see in your mind's eye, in your moral imagination, that you're cycling it through your heart, and you're giving that some love and compassion and kindness, and then you're breathing out. So this is that part about, somatic therapy. You're not holding on to the trauma or the pain of the world. You're letting it cycle through. So one way to deal with the personal and the external is to allow ourselves to honor our pain for what's happening in the world, to receive the tugs in the web of life, the suffering, the pain, the grief, and to cycle it through, and to breathe out loving kindness and compassion, and to utilize that honoring our pain as motivation for our work in the world. And I would say, for me, the concept of right livelihood is crucial to this, because I think that our mindfulness, particularly mindfulness practices, can be very self-oriented. Ron Purser wrote a book called McMindfulness, How Mindfulness Became the New Capitalist Spirituality. And it's all about, if we have a mindfulness practice without action in the world, or without the getting off the cushion, then it can become very individually reinforcing and self-interested. So I would say, how do we sit with our mindfulness practice? How do we have our spiritual practices so that we can get off the cushion with our spiritual practices and act in the world? And whether that's having a concept of right livelihood, or our contribution to the more than human world, whatever that is, I think that it is very connected, the inner and outer, and the spiritual and engaged.
I really want to add to that, honoring the pain for our world part, what Della was speaking about. And I think this is also comes in with the shift in consciousness part. How do we see grief? How do we see pain? How do we see not just my pain, but the pains of others, the pains of the world? And we're so taught to just push it down. It's shameful to talk about it. I don't want to fall apart. I don't want to cry in front of others. But no, this is a time, it's telling us we cannot let that not release. We actually need to see them, not just honor them. But what I love about the work that reconnects is we actually need to metabolize it. Metabolize is not only healing it or processing it, but let it become part of my metabolism. And to do that as a practice is just like washing dishes. basically, so that I can keep going. And it's not only shifting that ways of seeing my pain or the collective pain or grief, but also learn to do this in a collective. And I think this is the most challenging part for a lot of us, but it's also the most powerful thing when I can learn to fall apart gracefully or not gracefully, whatever. When I can learn to fall apart in groups in front of other people and be together, how powerful that can be and how much energy and support we can harness from that.
Yes, thank you. I would like to add to that, that making this part of us is the importance of grounding, and this, I would say that in these times, they're so trying, so difficult. One thing that I have found by myself, and, I have found that this is coming from others as well, is this confusion. There's a lot of confusion with the pandemic about who am I and who are, the people in my communities. Because one of the things that we see across, the board is that people who we thought we knew are, expressing or embracing worldviews, or a little pieces of worldviews, not an entire worldview, but a little pieces of worldview that are conflicting with the values that we were supposed to share as a group. So we are seeing things that we never expected, like, people who were in one side, and I'm saying like this because, it's all a spectrum, but people who were in one side of the streams are very, very close to the other side of the stream in the same topic. So it has become very difficult to even go to social media or even talk to friends or to people who were your comrades, the people who were with you in activism, they were practicing with you, and suddenly their worldview about what is happening or why it's happening is completely conflicted. So that becomes a wound. And I go back to the metaphor that Gracelynn brought at the beginning of the baby being born, is both the birthing of a baby and also is all these dead of an old world, the dead of an old worldview, and all this conflict is happening because of that. So it's not just the new that is happening, it's all the old that is dying and dealing with that. So my question to you, and to share with the participants in this webinar is, and also to close, because we're close to the end, is what are your suggestions to deal with that? Because I would say that one of the major pains that we have right now, apart from seeing how inequality is showing as a result of the pandemic, we also see that. We also see the conflict inside of people who sometimes need to choose to be silent in order to keep a friendship or to keep, being in a group because of, these conflicted expressions, I would say, of worldviews. So what would you say to them?
I mean, are you saying that what is, the response to COVID is very anthropocentric, and this is challenging? Is that what you're saying, Sylvia?
I'm saying that it one.
Edgy.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
It's good.
Yeah. Well, yes. All we do is anthropocentric as humans. That's one of the issues with our current worldview, is that we put the person, the human beings in the middle, and everything else is a is in function of, you know, whether they work for us or they serve us, or what is our relationship to them, like the human being is in the center. But what I'm trying to say right now is that one of the things that I have seen in this shift in consciousness that is actually not helping the shift, is actually hindering it, is the fear of where I am in all this. Who am I in all this? So many of us thought that we were clear about who our, who we were, or who we are, and what our values are. And we may belong to different groups, like, you know, the world that reconnects is one group, and, you know, we may be activists in another group, you know, Extinction Rebellion, or many other different areas. And then suddenly one of the things that is this COVID is bringing is also a mix in opinions. You know, suddenly the group that was very clear about climate change, for example, or who were very clear about, you know, how to address inequality, now suddenly you have some people saying, oh, this is a conspiracy, or vaccines are good or bad, or, you know, that's what I'm trying to say. And then suddenly the worldview that you thought that you share with them starts, you know, collapsing. And that is something that causes deep pain and deep unsettling. So what I see, you know, is that the worldview part of practicing reconnecting to nature, reconnecting to yourself, grounding, and going back to who you actually are, like Gracelynn say, remembering who we are. I think that is the solution, or one of the options that we have to stay grounded through all these unsettling that is happening around us. So my question was, you know, what else do you think that may help people in that area? And kind of connecting these to the course that, you know, we're going to start soon. How do you see that happening?
Okay, yeah, I can take that. And I hear this is also time for closing remarks. So first, I think I want to share that one of my favorite essays about worldviews is from Della Meadows, Leverage Points to Intervene in a System. She kind of looks at systems and then she ranks in order of effectiveness, you know, acupuncture points to change a system. And she says that there's 12 of them. She says that the second highest one from the top is changing the paradigm, the worldview. So that's this whole conversation, shifting paradigms and worldviews. And yet she says there's even 1 point higher than that, which is to transcend paradigms, to stay unattached. Because once we get attached or to our worldviews or paradigms, we can become dogmatic. We can have better than, like my view is better than thinking. We can get into proselytizing and manipulation and all of that, even if it's a beautiful worldview. So I think an invitation is to hold paradigms lightly and to try to transcend paradigms and to try to still be open to listening to someone else when they're sharing something that may not even feel totally in agreement with what you're feeling. And in alignment with that, sometimes when I'm with someone where I feel a clash in worldview, what I try to do is I try to go to the level of values, which can be deeper than that. And I try to see if I can find resonance there. And I almost always can. So, for example, if I were speaking with someone who was very critical of vaccines right now, I might, you know, regardless of whether I agree or disagree, I would go to the level of value and I would say, whoa, yeah, the profit motive in the pharmaceutical industry is problematic, and there's a value there for, you know, health and for, you know, transparency and for accountability, right? And I can dig that. So I invite folks, when you get into this clash of worldviews, to go deeper into the values and to try to see if you can find commonality there, and often we can, and then that can kind of reunite us, and then to stay open to what is that worldview? How do I transcend worldviews? How do I work with this person so that we can both, you know, come to a way of seeing that is better for a more flourishing people and planet? And I think that goal too. So moving towards more thriving for ecological systems and for people, I think everyone can get on board with that. So it's a collective journey of finding those worldviews and those values that guide us towards that. And we can have many conversations about that, but if we hold that intention of more human and planetary flourishing, I think we can find common alignment. And if we stay with that, we can transcend these divisions that we've seen right now and that we feel in our everyday life.
Thank you.
Yeah, I really want to add to that. Thank you so much. And not only going deeper into the value level, but I will add to that, when you're listening in with somebody who holds a polarized view than yours, go even deeper into listening to their body, to listening to their emotions through their body. And it's been my practice. I turn every conversation into my own spiritual practice, relational practice, and see how can I actually sing with the person in front of me instead of just listening to the words speaking through the conversation. Because it's been an intense training for me to see how can I actually regulate myself, co-regulate with the person who holds polarized view with me. And the motivations for me to do this is I always ask myself, what kind of future do I want to leave for the future generation? Do I, if two generations after me is witnessing this conversation right now, do I want to tell them that I have the right paradigm, or I am the person who is right? Or I want to show them an example of their ancestor wanting to collaborate and wanting to find ways to work together, regardless of what they believe together. So that has been my motivations to that, and it gives me opportunity to practice in a deeper level. How can I turn my spiritual practice in relational settings, in conversation, even in difficult conversation? And the second thing, I think this is also the last thing I want to say, is we talk about getting lost in paradigm or in worldviews, and I just want to say getting lost is actually a really good place to be. And for people who will be taking the course with us, don't rush to get to your next worldview or get to subscribe yourself in the next paradigm. Just get lost and enjoy being lost and stay there. Stay maybe even longer and play with it. In expressive work, we do a lot of play and in the imaginal and in the creative, and it doesn't make sense to the mind actually, but when we let go of what we think is right, then something else from the body, from the experience, from the imaginal, the third will come and be available to us, and it might show us something else, and the questions that we come into the inquiry might change after you stay there and play with it. So welcome on board and have fun with it.
Thank you, Gracelynn. Sylvia, what is the time we finish? Is it 5 o'clock?
Yeah.
Or we can maybe go on a few minutes longer than that. Is that okay?
Yeah, we have about 5 minutes, 4 or 5 minutes to address if there are questions either from you, Jane, or the presenters. I see that Della wants to say something.
Yeah, and I'd also like, go ahead, and then I'm going to read out something that Sascha's sent. Please go ahead, Deb.
Actually, that's what I was going to do. So you go ahead, Jane. I just want to make sure we saw it. Go ahead.
Okay, thanks. So this is a message that's come from Sascha. I share an observation that I made at the beginning of the pandemic. Sitting at home at my desk, even in the house, I observed that all was much more silent outside. No cars, hardly any people. I live at the edge of a town that is close to nature. It's not noisy there at all, but this was very different. It was silent. I went for a walk. All was very silent. I passed a girl also walking towards the forest. She wore headphones. Little bit further on, another person with a ghetto blaster. People can't stand the silence, but there is a big chance to go in it. The beauty of silence. Time to go within. But I do understand it can be scary if you are not used to it. We have to learn it, to pause, to stop running. It would change a lot if we would allow ourselves to confront ourselves in silence and listen to our inner, deepest voice. There on the ground is peace that we could bring outside. We just have to dare. So thank you, Sascha. And maybe Saskia, you can post in the chat. Thank you. Yeah. So really powerful. So Sylvia, you want to say some last remarks?
Well, I now listening to that and, having Sascha with us, even when he was unable by technology, and that reminds me of, how the presence and of what we do goes beyond technology. So thank you, Sascha, if you're there listening to us. Thank you for that last message. It's beautiful. No, the only thing that I wanted to say is, we do have the worldview dimension, and is starting soon. So those of you who are following this, you can connect with us for more information. The worldview dimension is a little bit different from other dimensions if you have taken dimensions with Gaia Education. And one of the things that makes it different is that is unlearning. It's not about learning new technologies. It's not about learning, how to do a compost toilet, like in the ecological, or, how to address issues of economy in your community, like in the economic, or how to make decisions as a group, like in the social. This is more about unlearning the paradigms and the patterns. And I really, really loved also what you were saying. I think it was you, Gracelynn, about being comfortable in the discomfort and accepting that unsettling, that is in between paradigms, not rushing. So I think there are some comments or questions. I don't know. No. So it's basically invitation. Oh, there's one from Kim.
That one I think we've addressed, unless there's anything else.
Right. Yeah.
I think the questions are quiet.
Yes. Which doesn't mean that they're not questions. So let's think, allow these to sink in, and you can close now, Jane.
Thank you. Well, I feel we've just touched upon some very deep topics. It's brought lots of things up for myself, and I'm sure for many of us. And I hope all of you that do join the Worldview Dimension get a chance to deepen these conversations over a period of time, because this kind of change, inner change, it takes time. It's not something that happens with one webinar. And I'd really like to thank Della, Sascha, Gracelynn, and Sylvia for this enlightening conversation. It's been a bit chaotic with technology, but that's the world we're living in, and let's welcome these disturbances and not react to them. So I'd just like to say it's been a real honor, and it's been very inspiring for me, and I hope you all have a great journey together on the Worldview Dimension. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.